just going to have 15 minutes to present. So I'm going to let the presenters know when they have 1 minute left. So these are pretty quick lightning rounds. We ask that any questions you have for the presenter, go ahead and drop those in the chat. We're hoping to have approximately 5 minutes to address questions, and we'll get to as many as we can. But like I said earlier, do take note of the email addresses that are in have already been posted in the chat. We'll try and get those back up there so you can find them and reach out to the presenters directly. Also invite everybody to come to our networking event, which is at 5 o'clock. We're going to not only announce the winners of our inaugural pitch competition, but that's a good time to connect with any points that really strike you. So first off, we have Audrey Barbakoff. And Audrey, I hope I got your last name correct. That's a fabulous last name. Audrey, her is the Community Engagement and Economic Development Manager at King County Library System. She writes and speaks nationally on libraries' role in building more equitable, inclusive, just, and resilient economic ecosystems. Audrey is currently pursuing a doctorate in education and organizational change and leadership at the University of Southern California, where her research focuses on building capacity for community-led services in public libraries. You can find her at www.the-buccaneer.com or connect on LinkedIn. So without further ado, Audrey, over to you.
Thanks so much, Morgan. I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and speak with all of you. This is one of my favorite subjects in the whole world, and I really enjoyed the plenary discussion. I'm just very honored to be here with you today, and I do have a bit of a cold, so pardon me. I will try to mute my microphone before coughing into it for all of you. So I'm here to talk about developing an equity-based service framework for serving entrepreneurs in public libraries. That's my own experience, but I think that the process that we went through is really relevant for all types of libraries of all sizes and resource levels. So I'm going to talk about my own experience, but I also I will also try to share how it can apply in many different situations. So I want to start off with sort of the basic premise here, which is that libraries can be a force for entrepreneurial equity. And so much of this is kind of baked into the basic normal, in a way that we serve folks. But I want to call out the pieces that are really essential here, which is stopping and taking a look at who is underserved in our communities, right? Whose voices are not being heard, who is not at the table, who is not being given equitable opportunities, the opportunities that they deserve, the opportunities that others have to be at the table, right? To have access to resources. And in entrepreneurship, this often manifests as access to education, and particularly access to capital, and sort of being at the table in those community-wide decision-making bodies, right? Who is not being served? And then once we've identified some of those folks, how can we start creating solutions with them instead of for them or at them? And I think this is a really basic question for all library services, right? How can we be centering the voices of community and doing things in a way that is, in order to center equity, we can't be making assumptions, right, from our own vantage points about what folks need or what they want or what their aspirations are. So how can we engage folks and do things with them? And underneath that, that's really underlined by an asset-based perspective. You might hear ABCD, asset-based community development. And this is really ensuring that when we are talking about underserved groups or centering equity, and that we are not coming from a perspective of weakness or need, right? That we're not saying there's anything wrong with someone, like that it is not someone's fault that their voice is not at the table, right? That they have strengths, that they have assets, that they are doing the work. They have the solutions. They do not need us to come up with the answers for them in libraries, right? Especially given that we are a primarily white, female, middle-aged, middle-class, able-bodied profession, right? We come from sort of a specific perspective. That we're not saying you need us and we know the answer. That we're saying you know the answer. You have the strengths. You got this. The only thing you have not had is fair access to the resources that you should have to be as successful as you could be, to reach as far as you could. And so the library can be a platform. If we think of ourselves as a collection of resources, right? We are space, and whether that's physical or virtual space, and knowledge, and staffing, and funding and project management and program planning, that we have all of these resources. How can we put them at the disposal of the people who are already doing really fantastic work in their communities? So why use a framework to sort of get at this, how to be a force for entrepreneurial equity? In the case of KCLS, we are a large system. We have 50 libraries. So we wanted to make sure that all staff had sort of a shared focus, that we can all be making decisions about how to serve our own communities without having to go through some big, onerous, bureaucratic, centralized process, but that we can still all sort of be swimming in the same direction, right? That we can be coming at things from the same way. We want to maximize our impact and our resources, right? We only have so much time, so much money that we can spend. So how do we make sure that we're maximizing our collective impact, right? That we have a strategy and allowing that local responsiveness. So the steps that we went through to develop a framework, that first defining that purpose, right, which I just went through, doing an environmental scan, based on what we learned in that scan, synthesizing and coming up with some recommendations for our own system, and then trying it out, test, iterate, improve, that sort of human-centered design thinking, maybe even to refer back to our opening session, a bit of entrepreneurial mindset there. So I talked about what the purpose was in my system, which is large and distributed, but that might be different in your system. So think about, as you are thinking about building a framework, what is the purpose of the work you're trying to do in your community or your library, right? Why do you need to be more strategic about how you're serving entrepreneurs? What is your goal? And then also to be really clear about how staff at various levels can use the results. So what you don't want to do is spend a whole bunch of time and energy putting together this really great resource, and then no one on staff really has any concept of how to use it, right? So when we put ours together, we actually began with, if you're a manager, here's how you might use this, right? You can come to this to say, to do a scan of what are the things going on in your community and to think about who are the folks you might want to reach out to and build partnership with. If you're a librarian, right, you might use this to think about, okay, what are the programs that I might want to do and who are the partners that I need to engage around that? If you're a frontline paraprofessional, right, what are the things that you might be seeing, the questions that people might be coming to you at the desk with that you would use this information for? So being really concrete about how something can be used so that it doesn't just kind of end up gathering dust in a binder somewhere. Environmental scanning. So there are a lot of ways to do environmental scans. Being a librarian, we started with reading. But like, what are the community documents out there, right? We have a responsibility to educate ourselves first, especially when we're going to reach out to historically marginalized groups. So, you know, we looked like, what are the city plans, right? The sort of the planning documents that cities are coming out with, that chambers are coming out with, that the sort of, you know, Vision 2040 kinds of documents that local economic councils are coming out with. There are tons of these out in the community, right? Your community is producing all sorts of documentation about what they want, right? What the problems are that they're facing, what they need, how they're thinking about things. So start there. And an example of this that was really interesting is when we started doing this at my library, we realized that as a library, we tend to think of people that we're serving, our audiences, in sort of by activity, people looking for jobs, people who want to start a business, people who are working on financial planning, right? And we realized that that is not how our community is thinking about these things. They are thinking about sectors, healthcare, construction, marine, right? Maritime. That's how they are thinking about it. And then within that, they're thinking about entrepreneurs, job seekers, et cetera. So when we say, hey, you know, this is for entrepreneurs, we're missing a section of people who are thinking of themselves first as the construction industry, for example. So that really sort of shifted how we decided to strategize. Then listening. This is so key. This is really the heart of it. There's a lot of ways to do this. We did key stakeholder interviews. We attended lots of community events and debriefed them as a group. Really sitting down and thinking, like, who are the people in this community that we need to hear from? And this is a great opportunity to build relationships, right? So like, this is a great excuse to cold call people. I could reach out to someone and say, hey, you're a really key player in, you know, the entrepreneurial ecosystem in your community, whether that's because someone holds an official position or whether it's just because like they're the person that everyone knows, right? That when you ask people who should I talk to, it's always this guy, right? This person. And we just sat down and said, what do you need? What do you want? What problems are you facing? And we didn't really talk about the library at all until the very, very end of those discussions. Like, we wanted to have that high level understanding of what do people really need and want. And then it's our job to figure out how the library can impact that, right? Because if you ask people what they want from the library, they tell you books, because that's what they think of. That's what they know. So engage them in a really higher level discussion about their aspirations and their challenges. And then we can say, okay, you said that you care about this thing, and so the library is going to offer that. That's much more powerful. And then we engaged in some asset mapping, which is a way of sort of visualizing how the various players in a sector fit together, right? What their relationships are. And there are many ways to do that. And I'm going to recommend the University of Kansas Community Toolbox as a great resource for learning more about that, because we don't have time for me to give you an in-depth look into the different types of asset mapping today. But it's not scary. There's a lot of ways to do it, and many of them are pretty simple. So the conclusions that we drew from this, we identified 8 service audiences of focus. For example, one of them is immigrant and refugee micro entrepreneurs who are looking to expand. So micro entrepreneur being someone who employs fewer than 5 people. And we found that this was especially true in things like food businesses. People would start small, they could get going, they have that heart for entrepreneurship, that mind for entrepreneurship. They would start a business baking cakes in their kitchen. They would start expanding, right? They would do really well. The word would get out. They had a great product. They would start trying to expand. They'd sell at the farmer's market, and boom, public health would catch them. They're not adhering to all kinds of regulations, and they would get whacked with a huge fine and get shut down, right? So that expansion piece we found was like learning the landscape of how do you do that, especially if you're not from this country and you're not even clear on where those regulations might come into play, like you don't even know they exist. Once we did that, we wanted to define outcomes, right? What are the key important things what does success look like in serving this group? And then work backwards to make a service plan. The tool that we used for this was Lean Canvas, to go back to our first morning session talking about the entrepreneurial mindset. Lean Canvas is a quick business planning tool, or a one-page business plan. Since that's how entrepreneurs think, that is how we decided to think. So we used Lean Canvas as our tool. There are other tools you can use to make your plans. Logic models, I think, are fairly common in libraries, and that's a great one too that helps you work backwards. Then, before we came out with any final conclusions, we ran them through a racial equity assessment. And again, there's great tools out there to teach you how to do that. We used the City of Seattle Social Justice, Race Initiative toolkit. But basically, it's a way of saying who's going to be impacted by these recommendations, how might they be helped or harmed, and how can we increase the help and mitigate the harm. So that's like 5-second racial equity analysis. Obviously, there's a lot more to it, so I encourage you to do some research there. And then finally, continuous improvement. This is not just a document, right? We want to create a framework for action. So you got to try it out, and you've got to adapt it as you learn things. So for example, with that group, we held a Latinx entrepreneur fair. We mean business, negocios redondos, a fully bilingual event. And we learned from it, and we adapted what we were doing because of it. So taking that just iterating approach and keep listening, right? That's not a thing you do one time, those like sort of formal interviews, but just that constant discussion with communities so that we're hearing what they need from us. How did we do? How can we do better? Coming at it with that humility, cultural humility, intellectual humility, and saying, we're trying this thing. How can we do more of this thing? How can we do better? When you do something like this in your libraries, your communities are different, your library is different, the tools that you choose to use may be different, but that process of this is the same. Learning about your community in all of the ways that are available to you, connecting with real humans and listening to them about what they care about, focusing in on how you and your library can make a difference, trying it out and repeating. That is something that we can all do regardless of size or type of library. And we are 10:45 on the button. I hope I didn't talk too fast for you, but thank you very much. And I will look forward to taking questions when we can, and feel free to follow up with me by email. Thank you.
Audrey, that was amazing. Thank you so much. And that timing was like I aspire to be that good with my timing. So fabulous job. Thank you so much, Audrey. Again, we'll put Audrey's email in the chat once more so you can reach out with questions, but we will try and get to any questions you may have for Audrey at the end. I'm going to invite LaMonica to go ahead and get her slides up while I introduce her. So we have LaMonica Wiggins, she, her. She is the Entrepreneurship and Economics Librarian at the University of Pittsburgh. In her position, she supports university affiliates and the public with small business research. She develops outreach programs to address disparities in the entrepreneurial experience of African Americans, women, and other disenfranchised entrepreneurs. She collaborates with government and nonprofit organizations to design services for Pittsburgh-based entrepreneurs. Without further ado, here is LaMonica Wiggins.
Hi, everyone. As Morgan said, my name is LaMonica Wiggins, and I am the Entrepreneurship Librarian at the University of Pittsburgh. And I want to thank the Entrepreneurial Committee for giving me the opportunity to present here today on a project that I'm currently developing. I'm going to discuss a program called the Lunchroom and how we hope to teach the next generation business skills in the era of COVID using this program. I apologize, I am not showing my face. I have a couple of things going on in the background with animals running around. So I will, I'll just have my beautiful picture of the Cathedral of Learning up. So youth and entrepreneurship, young people becoming entrepreneurs is not a new concept. If we think about the most popular startups within the last couple of centuries, these businesses are often started by entrepreneurs under the age of 30. So entrepreneurship has become a viable career option for many who find themselves outside the traditional high school to college to job trajectory. According to a recent Nielsen study mentioned in Forbes, about 54% of Gen Z, so those aged 15 to 21, indicated that they wanted to start their own business, citing having more control, being debt-free, having a purposeful life, and being good to the planet as driving forces behind their entrepreneurial ambitions. Additionally, many Gen Zs are realizing a life without college and college debt to achieve their life's goals. This can be especially significant for Black and Brown communities where high school graduation rates are still lower, about 79 to 89%, and unemployment rates are still higher, 13% for young Black youth, 11% for young Hispanic youth, which is significantly higher than their white counterparts. So in a recent study done by the UN entitled Youth Social Entrepreneurship and the 2030 Agenda, experts say unemployment among the world's 1.2 billion youth is far higher than adults, and COVID-19 has worsened their outlook for job prospects. So with soaring unemployment numbers and a dismal job market, today's youth is understandably worried. Not only do they have to contend with an education that is often on pause, but they also have to develop on-the-fly new virtual skills in order to be competitive in this ever-changing market. So for many reasons, entrepreneurship education can be beneficial to youth. Even if they don't start a business, youth can learn hard and soft skills like the values of leadership, creativity, and teamwork, skills in marketing, financial literacy, social responsibility and ethics, and using emerging technologies. So in response to this, I set out to create a library-run social innovation competition that would introduce minority youth in the Pittsburgh area to entrepreneurship as a viable career path and provide some much needed funding. Although I don't normally work with middle and high school students in my day-to-day, I have given a couple of presentations at youth STEAM summer camps. This by no means makes me an expert with working with children, so I definitely wanted to attend a virtual brainstorming session that our community engagement center in our Hill District neighborhood was offering. And at this session, I was able to hook up with Carla and Jeremy from the Oakland Planning and Development Corporation's Future Makers, which is an enrichment program offered to 7th through 12th graders, and it gives them the opportunity to learn about college and careers. Carla is the director of that program, and Jeremy is the high school teacher who runs the student activities. So we quickly formed a partnership and decided to share equal responsibility in the development of this program, which I'll get to. The future makers are going to be providing the student participants, so we'll have a built-in audience, and they will manage the day-to-day activities for the students. And myself in the library will develop the curriculum, manage the weekly speaking engagements, and operate the pitch competition. So during this time we're planning this, this project, a grant became available from the Pitt STEAM Studio through the Engagement Center. They were offering seed grants between $1,000 and $3,000 for community partners. And we decided to submit a grant application for our Lunchroom program. And we were awarded the STEAM Team Project Seed Grant, which accelerates co-created university and community collaborations around STEAM initiatives and workforce development. So the lunchroom is modeled after the boardroom, where a lot of decisions and discussions happen for students. This is a place where they are able to explore ideas with each other. So the lunchroom is a social innovation competition for 7th through 12th graders. And the curriculum is designed to introduce students to basic business skills needed to create a new social or technology-based venture, and will facilitate development in the entrepreneurial mindset and hopefully help the students bring their ideas to fruition. So through weekly remote meetups, expert speakers, interactive virtual activities, the students will develop a business plan for a venture that will address a need in their communities, and the students will receive guidance from university and community practitioners and develop critical skills in ideation, product creation, business, financial literacy, market research, and pitching. At the conclusion of the program, the students will participate in a pitch competition where they'll share their ideas with a panel of practitioners, receive feedback and monetary prizes. But at the end of this program, the students will be encouraged to enter into national pitch competitions for middle and high school students, and we'll be providing support for that afterwards. So some of the learning outcomes for the students is learning about the importance and the benefits of entrepreneurship in society and how everyone can be entrepreneurial in their daily lives. The skills and personality characteristics of entrepreneurs, the process of starting a new venture from idea to market, how to pitch appropriately to different audiences, the lexicon of entrepreneurship, and then also using digital technology to become more competitive in the landscape and the workplace landscape. So the curriculum is designed to happen over 6 weeks, and we're tackling different aspects of the startup process with speakers and hands-on activities. So week 1, we're looking at the entrepreneurial mindset. So what is an entrepreneur? What are the characteristics? How does entrepreneurship shape our society? What specifically is social entrepreneurship, and how do they develop ideas that address needs in their community? Week 2 is how do entrepreneurs identify and solve problems? So ideation. Week 3 is business planning and market research. So the mechanics of starting a business, identifying customers, current trends, etc. Week 4 is creating a physical or digital product. So we'll be working with our open lab, the library's makerspace, for prototyping and using different technologies. Week 5, we'll be working on how to create a slide deck and encouraging the students to use different technologies to market their idea. And then the last week is obviously the pitch competition. So success of the program will be measured by tracking student attendance and participation. Students will actively participate in creating weekly journal entries, reflections on chapter readings and articles. They'll have to create their own mini business plan and budget form. And as I said, a slide deck, digital presentation, and ultimately the pitch to the investor. So these are the deliverables from students. So we didn't create this program from scratch. There are many examples of entrepreneurship curricula online. Here's a few examples of some of the programs we use to help develop our own. EverFi, Venture Lab are both online tools for entrepreneurship curriculum. And then this Park Hill School District was an actual school that created an entrepreneurship program as well that we use to model our own. We also used a number of tools, business tools and tech tools like the Lean Canvas. We modified it for this specific audience. We also use business plans. We're using Zoom as the platform for everything, and Padlet for the students to use to reflect on the activities and the articles and the chapters they have to read. We'll be using Google Slides because many students don't have access to Microsoft Word or, Microsoft PowerPoint. There are some books that we'll be sending in a toolkit to the students, including a Paperboy's Fable. And then we'll also have a LibGuide that houses all of the materials the students will need as well. So I talked about why entrepreneurship education can be good for young students, but why is the library leading this program? So for one reason, as the entrepreneurship librarian, I work with entrepreneurs on campus and in the community quite frequently, especially entrepreneurs of color. And in these particular communities, many see the library as a trusted source for help and access to business information. Also, when I thought about designing this program, I knew I needed to have library administration on board. And so I looked into our strategic goals for 2020 to 2025 plan. And this program seems to support many of these goals, including having better engagement with the Homewood and Hills CECs. So our community engagement centers, this program was partially funded by an engagement center, and before COVID, it was going to be held in person at one of their locations. So I think this sort of solidifies our partnership with this organization. Also, commitment to diversity and inclusion in everything that we do. This particular lunchroom program is targeted towards minority students and teaching them entrepreneurship. And as a person of color myself, I believe that this goes a long way in showing our commitment, our intentional commitment to this. And then be active creators and connectors in local and government information networks. Under our current university librarian, we have been trying to be more open in breaking down barriers for access to information from the larger Pittsburgh community. And in doing this, we're providing hotspots within the library and at some of our community engagement centers where folks can use these very specialized business resources. And so I think the students will also be diving into some of these resources. We'll be learning different research strategies and how to use specific types of resources. So I think that supports that particular goal as well. And I apologize if I'm going so fast. I'm trying to get this done in 15 minutes. So another why as to why we are doing this and why we're doing it now is this year is the University of Pittsburgh's Year of Engagement, which is a celebration of our work within the community and is supposed to be pushing for more collaborations. And so this certainly fits into that, that particular initiative with the universities. So it wasn't hard to convince library administration that this was a good idea to pursue. So some tips that I've kind of learned through this process. So think, pair, and share. Getting young people to talk about their ideas is often very hard. They're very shy, especially over Zoom. And so thinking about an activity or an article, having them look at it beforehand, before the class on their own, and then during class, having them to pair with another colleague to discuss that idea, and then coming together as a group and sharing it out is a better way we have found to keep them engaged. Also, the use of relevant examples. So when I first started this, I was using Uber as my example, and I came to realize that Uber is not as much of they don't have as much of a connection to it as, say, the college students that I'm usually working with. So I had to change, my examples, bringing in Nike and TikTok and things of that into pairing some of these concepts to ideas and businesses that they're already aware of, and then using topical speakers. So I am not an expert in every aspect of the startup process. And so using my larger network of folks, having professors come in and speak about different topics of the startup process has been very helpful. It's taken some of the pressure off. And then lastly, creating templates for the students to use. So students are more comfortable knowing what you want from them. And so creating a business plan template, creating a budget form template, it makes it easier for them to feel comfortable participating in all the activities that we have going on. So I would be happy to answer any questions that you have about the lunchroom and any kind of outreach to youth.
Fabulous, LaMonica. First of all, perfect timing. That was great. And there are so many great questions already for you in the chat. So our fabulous chat manager, Andrea, will get those to you. But again, I will put LaMonica's information in the box so you can, the chat box, so you can reach out to her. So last but certainly not least, we have Jenn Hensel. Jenn, you can go ahead and start getting your slides up while I introduce you. So Jenn Hensel, she, her, serves as the Assistant Director of Launch Greensboro, the entrepreneurship arm of the Chamber of Commerce in Greensboro, North Carolina. She moved to North Carolina from Colorado, is an obsessive podcast listener, vegan chef, disorganized perfectionist, and mommy of 2 tiny future feminists. I love that. Jenn provided coaching for each of the top 5 contestants for the ELC at the table pitch competition, which is coming up at 3 o'clock. So without further ado, turning it over to Jenn.
Thanks so much, Morgan. Want to make sure that you can see and hear me. Welcome, everyone, to Mapping Innovation and Engagement. Here's the question: why am I talking about this? Who am I to be speaking at a library conference? And really, what I want to say is, as the Assistant Director of Launch Greensboro, which is the entrepreneurship arm of the Greensboro Chamber of Commerce, I have spent 3 years developing deep relationships with entrepreneurs and serving as a partner organization in a pretty great ecosystem. And so I want to talk to you about how to map that, how to create innovation and engagement as a library, because libraries are awesome, right? And I think libraries are uniquely suited to support economic development through making touch points with individuals for a couple of reasons. One is that libraries are known by all and they serve all. So libraries reach a broader cross-section of the public than almost any organization I can think of. Libraries are community-driven. Your mission is about serving and supporting those individuals that live in your community. And so you are driven to see your community succeed and be happy and content and fulfilled and have the prosperity that, that we all seek as entrepreneurial support organizations. And you are research and resource experts. That is what you're known for. And so lean into that. Don't shy away from the expertise that you bring to the table. And the reason that I, as an entrepreneurial support organization, want to tell you about the ways that you can engage are because I think that you can help a system that is already existing or needs a little boost. I really believe that you, as a librarian, can help an ecosystem thrive. So through this presentation, I want to show you that you can serve your patrons as well as a larger ecosystem and its entrepreneurs by being a new and non-traditional entry point and referring agency. So here's what I mean by non-traditional entrepreneur, because I'm going to reference that phrase quite a bit through the presentation. I mean what Gary has referenced and Audrey has referenced. People who do not self-identify as entrepreneurs are exactly the kind of people that you have contact with and access to. They walk through your doors as a library without hesitation. They do not walk through my doors as an entrepreneurial support organization without hesitation. They certainly have to identify as an entrepreneur to know to find me and to know to come to me for services. But you have constant contact with people who maybe have an idea, maybe have already started a business, but wouldn't use the keyword search entrepreneur introduce themselves in a networking event as an entrepreneur. They're just doing their thing, right? So another important thing, as I referenced earlier, is you as librarians have the ability to provide tools and skills that are necessary for all levels of entrepreneurs to have access and proficiency in. So research skills and understanding data are critical for entrepreneurs to be successful. And frankly, those skills are exceedingly rare. So even if you're not in a position, depending on the size or scope of your library or your community, to develop brand new programs to serve entrepreneurs, please lean into the knowledge that helping people identify research and market data and helping them understand that and implement in their business decision making is serving entrepreneurs in economic development. And the last thing I would say is that you are already, as a librarian, a center of a community. You are already matchmakers. So much of what librarians do is listen to the patrons that come in and ask the questions and refer people back out to a plethora of community organizations. So what I hope to teach you about today is how to map your ecosystem so that you can be a referral and a matchmaker to other support organizations, because what we know to be true is that not a single organization can serve all entrepreneurs of all stages, of all industries, with all the skills that they are going to need to be successful. So in order to be a good partner and a good player, you really have to be a matchmaker for the people who walk through your doors. So let's get some foundation language here. What is an entrepreneurial ecosystem? So I really like to think of it as a defined area that has multiple structures and systems that allow for a diverse group of organisms to survive and thrive holistically, right? And so when you think about that in terms of entrepreneurship, you really start to think about what are the structures and systems in my area, region, community that has a diverse group of people, your entrepreneurs, and how are they being supported? How are they navigating through holistically so that they can thrive and create, okay? So that to me is an entrepreneurial ecosystem. So I want to teach you about mapping as a verb. When you outline an entrepreneur's journey, right? When you walk outside the walls of the library and you think about things from the entrepreneur's perspective as an individual person who maybe not self-identifying, as you think about their journey, you begin to understand the complex needs that they have as they move through the stages of idea, strategy, launching that business, growing that business, potentially seeking investment and additional capital, and scaling, right? So they're within all of these, and this is certainly not all of the realms of entrepreneurship. These are some pretty big, broad categories, but you understand at different stages, people need certain things. And within those stages, those certain things they can need can be served by a variety of organizations, but entrepreneurs need things like research. Ding, ding, ding for you, right? They need help with business plans. They might need help with pitching their ideas or understanding financials and learning how to use a P&L to make good decisions. They might be in a customer discovery phase. You've heard that phrase a couple times today. They might be in the framework of understanding what it is their customers need most that they can serve. Or they might be needing help understanding regulation and permitting and government contracting, right? So as you think about the stages of an entrepreneur, the different industries that there are, and the particular skills and tactics the entrepreneurs need to master in order to be successful, you begin to think about it as a map, which I'm saying is a visual representation. It's an organizing tool to understand what's going on in the big picture. And it's going to look different for every town, especially based on the size of your town or your city. But really think about what organizations in my community are serving what stage and through what service offerings. Now, once you have outlined all of that and you've put all the pieces together and you understand this big picture, you can start to think about how you can fit into it and serve the greater good by identifying the gaps that are in the ecosystem and discovering what opportunities exist to serve entrepreneurs so that they can survive and thrive. Because again, no organization can do it all. It's going to take multiple structures and systems to serve entrepreneurs all along the way of their journey. So you don't necessarily have to build programs out of thin air or reinvent the wheel. by creating a map of what's going on in your community and how those organizations relate to each other and relate to the entrepreneurs they serve, you can develop or adjust accordingly. And it teaches you not to be a silo, right? So it teaches you to be part of the ecosystem in a way that is engaging with and creating advantage for entrepreneurs holistically. So through this mapping process and figuring out where the gaps and opportunities are, you can support the growth of entrepreneurs and your partners and your local economy. So as you're doing this, I believe that there are 3 components that you really have to keep in mind. And those are your library's mission and who you serve, the entrepreneurs themselves as individuals. So really, when I say I build deep relationships with people and it assists me in my work, I mean it. Entrepreneurs are our neighbors. They are people that we know, and you serve them as you would serve an individual rather than this like elevated thing. We've talked a little bit about Uber and Facebook and how that's not the kinds of entrepreneurs we need to be thinking about or talking about. So thinking about entrepreneurs and about the ecosystem as a whole. So consider all of their unique perspectives and needs. Be sure not to duplicate services because that's not playing well in the sandbox of the ecosystem, right? So if you think about duplicating services, are you really offering services to a new group of people, or are you pulling people from another organization's participant list and they're just coming to you, and thus it is not serving the ecosystem or the entrepreneurs if there is duplicative services, especially in a small town. But really think about finding your niche. When you look at that gap, where's a niche that you can fill? And I think you can do that by evaluating your team and your staff and your volunteers and leaning into some special skills that they might have. Maybe one of your employees' partners is a restaurateur, and that's a place that your organization can lean into and really serve a specific industry, right? So think about if your team has great skills and great back experience, how can we elevate that and move that into a place that is programmatically helpful to an entrepreneur? And then refer. The more referrals you make to other partner organizations, the more they refer back to you, and the more you begin to have this really altruistic community that is supporting the whole. So I'm going to give you 2 quick program playbooks that really work to build a community's entrepreneurial mindset. I didn't know when I put this proposal together how much of a theme that would be in today's conference, but it's really phenomenal. But these 2 programs I'm going to give you because they are easy to reproduce and they are very low cost, and more than anything, they serve, I believe, the kind of patrons that you will have this easy access to. So one of those programs we call TBD, so to be determined. It's a playbook for innovation and inspiration. And the other program is Furlough to Entrepreneurship Workshop, which is a playbook for new engagement. So our TBD program is something that we developed here in Greensboro, and we like to call it Open Mic Night meets Business Brainstorming. The goal of this event is to create space for innovation, to create inspiration, to allow for courage, to allow for connection, and to be someone's first steps in their entrepreneurial journey. So I've given you a few tips and tricks of the trade, and if you're interested in learning a little bit more, feel free to email me. But the most important thing for me from this brainstorming side of things is to have big whiteboards or flip charts in separate spaces where you can have people pitch really informal, brand new ideas that may be the first time that they're talking in public outside of their friends and family circle about this idea they have, and brainstorming with people who they've never met. So you want to have space and whiteboard for that innovation, inspiration, and connection. The event is so much fun. It's really a casual event from our perspective. And if you want to learn a little bit more about how the event runs specifically, feel free to hit me up on email, and I'd love to tell you how we developed the program and the success that we found. Christina is one of our entrepreneurs who went through this program and is still with us working through other parts of our programs. She says it's really easy to get stuck in your own brain in the early days. But TBD allowed me to share my business ideas with open-minded individuals and receive quality feedback from small groups. I got more ideas from the brainstorming sessions than I expected. People were really interested in helping others. The community's feedback, which was diverse and outside my circle, really helped jumpstart my strategy and turn my idea into an actual business. So again, this testimonial hits on the goals of innovation, easy access, inspiration, and the courage that it takes to start the entrepreneurship journey. The other program I want to share with you, the Furlough to Entrepreneurial Workshop. The goal of this program was really, from our perspective, to support a new group of potential entrepreneurs. So when we looked at what was going on in 2020 and really seeing the amount of unemployed and furloughed people in the COVID economy, we knew that there was a place that we could serve people who maybe had not considered entrepreneurship as a career path for themselves, but are now in an unlikely place to do so. So they may be thinking and dreaming about being their own boss in a totally different way than they were before, which means we have to meet them where they are. The content of this program that we use really helps people test their assumptions and begin creating a strategy about a business. The couple things tips that I'll give you are, this requires a lot of time. The program that we run runs anywhere from 12 to 15 hours. And the required reading for this is Reading Lean Startup and Running Lean by Eric Ries and Ash Maria. They are two great books. You've heard other speakers today talk about the Lean Canvas methodology, and that is a critical component of what we believe helps particularly non-traditional entrepreneurs start thinking entrepreneurially about the problem that they're solving and who they're solving it for. So again, if you want to hear more about how the event runs, feel free to email me. We can set up a time to chat because there's a lot of detail and planning that goes into this particular program, but it's so great. Lauren said this was so helpful and efficient. So Lauren was furloughed from her job in May. She says, this was helpful for guiding my business planning. We were taught with specific examples and then given time to think about the details of our individual business. The structure kept me on track and got my thoughts out of my head and on paper. I could finally see the full picture. I learned a ton through the Lean Canvas method, but in addition to that, and potentially more helpful, was the energy and motivation to keep grinding, planning, and discovering. The network came at a time when I felt most alone in my plans and questioning my ideas. So here's what I want to leave you with. Libraries play a role, so get in there, map your ecosystem, and help grow an entrepreneurial mindset. Figure out where the gaps are, be a matchmaker, create opportunities, engage your community in innovation, connection, lean startup methodology, and help build the skills to create sustainable businesses in your community.
Oh my gosh, Jen, I feel like you're like the best cheerleader for libraries ever.
I hope so.
Yes, I'm like pumped to get out there. So especially as soon as we can do it face to face. Jenn Hensel, thank you so much for that fabulous presentation. All right, so those are our three wonderful speakers for today's topics on community engagement, economic development, and outreach. I'm gonna actually turn things over to our fabulous chat manager, Andrea, to get started on questions. Andrea?
Hello. So we had a lot of questions for LaMonica. So I want to start with, there were questions about the specifics of the program, such as how many students were in it, and then how to keep them engaged. And so related to that, things about attrition. So if you could kind of wrap up an answer to three questions in one: how many students, how did you keep them involved, and then did you have students dropping out?
Yeah, so I can speak to those three questions. So the students that are a part of the program, they're students between the 7th and 12th grade. The students are actually being paid to be a participant in the Future Makers program. So they receive a hourly salary or hourly wage to participate in any of the programming that the Future Makers put on. So they do all types of programming like drones and all kinds of instruction for the students. And so that sort of helps with participation and attrition, that the fact that they're required to be there because it is considered a job. So they're getting paid a wage to be there. And also the fact that this program hasn't actually happened yet. It starts in February. And so part of the design is that the students, in addition to getting their paycheck, they'll also get prize money for their ideas. And so they can use that money any way that they see fit. They can use it to work on a project. They can use it to prepare for college. They can use it to support their family, however they would like to use that money. So that really is what we're hoping will keep the students engaged as well. And they're part of the sessions the weekly remote meetings is that the students are given ahead of time either a chapter or an article that they need to read. So they will come to the session being ready to discuss it and using that think, pair, and share method of having them work as a group and then share to the larger student body that's participating in the program is really what has been helpful in the past in keeping the students engaged and keeping them talking and being supportive. So that's my answer to all 3 questions. I hope I got everything there.
Perfect, thank you. And this question is for Jenn. With the events where people are sharing ideas, maybe that they've been thinking about, do you find that anyone's nervous about other people stealing their ideas?
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting question. And I think I've had 2 people ask me about that over the course of doing this for a year and a half. So it's not a huge barrier for the people that come through our door, mostly because they know the purpose of the event. So in our marketing, we talk about this is an open mic night and this is brainstorming. And so you have to share your idea. And if people are really nervous and they walk in the room and you know they scan the room and don't feel like it might be the right place, there's still an opportunity for them to participate in those small group discussions versus being the one who pitches the idea. And so, you know, one of the things we talk about with all entrepreneurs is there's a million opportunities out there. There are a million problems to solve. And so competition isn't a value that we, you know, tend to really spend a lot of time thinking about from that perspective.
Okay, great. Thank you. And another question for LaMonica. I'm guessing that this came from an academic librarian. How do you balance time on campus and your off-campus engagement?
So we have been working from home since March, and we'll continue to work from home through the spring as well. So it's not that much of an issue. You know, time management's not much of an issue when you're working from home, especially if you live alone. I don't have any distractions here. But before pre-COVID, you know, I would set up specific days to work with certain groups. So, you know, if we are going to be at a community partner on Tuesdays, you know, I'm limiting my interaction with the clientele to that day. So we're setting up appointments throughout that day. I'm going to that location and being on site there throughout that day. So that really helps to sort of limit the craziness. A lot of the folks that I'm working with are off campus, or they're supporting some sort of initiative off campus, whether they're like a department on campus, their clientele is off campus. So I don't do a ton of work like specifically with the student body on campus outside of library instruction and working with like pitch competitions on campus. So it helps, it gives me the opportunity to be more out in the community and to push you know, the face of the library out into the community as well.
Great, thank you. Thank you, everyone. And most of the pretty much all of the comments in the chat have been so appreciative of all these presentations and sharing ideas and just agreeing with everything that all 3 presenters said. So I hope I kind of distilled the questions down, but you will have more opportunities to reach out to the presenters either through their email addresses or during our networking time.
Thank you so much, Audrey. That was fabulous. Thank you once more. Can we get some reactions to our fabulous presenters? Thank you all so much. So You've made it through the first half of today's online ELC 2020. We are going to take a break for about 30 minutes, but you will want to be back here at 3 o'clock because we are so excited. We are so pumped for our inaugural pitch competition, which starts at 3. So I'm going to turn things back over to Steve for any last minute things we need to know about, but thank you all so much.
I think we're good. We look forward to seeing you at 3 o'clock for what should be a very exciting pitch competition. So have a good half-hour break. And thank you all for being here.